But now I want to say something regarding pedophilia. This is driven by recurrent, intense sexually arousing fantasies about children, and especially by urges or behaviors that correspond to them. First and foremost, young adolescents in a prepubescent phase get lost in these fantasies, but also adults of both sexes in particular, although sexually deviant men are usually at the forefront in this respect. They are not only deviant, but also many years older than the children who are the target of their fantasies and behavior. Pedophilia is a form of paraphilia which, in addition to sexual abuse, is aimed mainly at harming children, even to the point of murdering them. Sexual assaults that affect children and usually harm them throughout their lives are very common. This, while elsewhere many sexual assaults and coercions, and so on are simply freely invented also with regard to adults in order to take revenge and retaliation for some reason, or to extort money, and so on, as has become common especially in recent times, especially out of evil revenge and also because of the money that is hoped for as compensation. Sexual guidelines in this regard are valued differently in Western cultures than in many Far Eastern or Oriental cultures, as pedophilia and general sexual activity, marriage and childbirth may be commonplace at much younger ages, and thus much greater age differences between sexual partners are accepted. Most pedophiles and rapists of women and also men, which is less well known, are male, but there are indeed also females who sexually abuse children as pedophiles, as well as their own, and men, which is also less well known but does occur, albeit to a lesser extent. Pedophilia can be towards young boys, girls or both, although pedophiles prefer children of the opposite sex. In many cases, the child knows the adults as a family member, resulting in incest when the pedophilic act occurs. A step-parent, a friend or a person of authority such as a teacher or otherwise a person of instruction or acquaintance, and so on. Pedophiles can be exclusively attracted to children or also exclusively to adults, but pronounced pedophilia refers only to the sexual abuse of children. However, there is also the criminal pedophile, which is associated with a comorbidity or concomitant disorder, which manifests itself as a socially hostile personality disorder, associated with threats of violence. It also frequently occurs that the pedophilia victim is threatened that, for example, his toy will be destroyed or a pet belonging to him will be injured or killed, and so on if he talks about the pedophilic abuse with someone. If the person who is pathologically and thus chronically addicted to pedophilia is analyzed, it is recognized that there is usually an addiction coupled with depression, which often indicates a family dysfunction suffered earlier and as a child. Such a dysfunction usually points to a personally experienced sexual abuse, or in the case of married persons also to conflicts in the marriage which results in sexual abnormalities, as well as pedophilia or other comorbid or accompanying disorders. These can be very diverse and go far beyond what is known to earthly science, which deals with the field of antisocial personality disorder, which is so psychologically profound in its basic features that it is all too often misunderstood by the experts. For example, many psychology scientists do not realize that the origin of the overt and covert degenerations of human beings is often and toward in childhood, such as panic attacks, lying and slandering, and sudden or prolonged anxiety attacks. But there are also other degenerations, such as pathological thievery, violence, hatred of people, things or situations, and so on. A deficit of learning ability and attention, hostility, up to and including post-traumatic states and hyperactivity, murder, mistrust, work shyness, unkindness, spitefulness, a tendency to addiction of many kinds, as well as many other aspects. The truth that psychotic degenerations are often not recognized as such, especially not by so-called professionals who call themselves psychologists and think they know everything, and in this sense misjudge effective psychological facts, make many human beings become something false that they do not want to be. Already from the 21st day after conception, the first forms of the basic character are formed in the mother's womb, through the influence of the psychological influence of the pregnant woman, which develops after the birth of the child until the state of emerging puberty. If impulses of a wrong psychological development already set in during pregnancy and after birth up to the state of puberty or during it in the developing character, then profound basic character traits are formed from them. These remain hidden, but immediately break through to the outside when a corresponding stirring or surge from the world of thoughts and feelings occurs and sets these basic character traits into excitement and such a turmoil that they become active, namely outwardly through words, actions and activities, and so on, which triggers corresponding reactions for good or evil. If in the course of this time, especially during puberty, the whole of this is not cleared up and neutralized and brought to the state of balance of a human being, if this is necessary, if faulty things have taken root in the basic character, then the so-called running of the gauntlet through life is called for, which means that panic, lying, slanderous attacks as well as sudden or prolonged states of anxiety and other degenerations, such as pathological thievery, violence and hatred towards human beings, things and situations and so on, as well as a deficit of learning ability and attention, hostility, up to post-traumatic states and hyperactivity, murder, mistrust, work shyness, unkindness, spitefulness, tendency to addiction of many kinds, as well as many other negative aspects come to the fore. If, however, the human being in his or her basic character is not at all or only burdened very little with the negative values mentioned, then he or she does not belong to the bulk of humanity, but to a minority which is concerned to strive for peace, love, humanity and help among the human beings and as a whole to the peoples in the whole of humanity, and to preserve what has been achieved in this respect. This is also the case when everything is very laborious and very little has been achieved so far and is constantly endangered, because the majority of earthly humanity is still greedy for money and wealth, for possessions, violence, murder and manslaughter, selfishness in every conceivable way, for envy, advantage, hatred, revenge, lies and slander. This is vehemently denied, but all this proves to be a fact as soon as a louse crawls over the lever of this majority of earthlings, or if anything else does not suit them, for then they immediately let loose to the outside world all that lies dormant deep in their basic character: malice, revenge, hatred, violence, lies, slander, murder and manslaughter. And if that is not enough, then there is the military, which can create order by force of arms or launch a war in order to enforce that which lurks unmastered, uncensored and hidden in the depths of one's own basic character as a real attitude, like a bloodthirsty predator, which hypocritically and deviously waits to be able to strike out in a vicious and deceitful manner. This is actually what I have to say, and what I learned especially from Svahoff nearly 80 years ago and have never forgotten. He knew a lot more about the human psyche than is peculiar to earthly psychologists, who fancy themselves kings of their field, but in reality and truth know very little.